Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. My dear students, this is your lecture number 6. Today we'll talk about literary terms in English literature. So this is your history of English literature class. These terminologies are very much important because I think like if you do not know or if you do not have enough knowledge about the literary terms in English literature, so the things would be a bit difficult for you to understand. So that is why I have planned to teach you the literary terms which we will be using time and again during the lectures. Okay, my dear students, first of all I'll tell you something from the last lectures. Actually previously we were talking about Anglo-Saxon literature and then Anglo-Norman, and then we focused on the prominent figures of both the periods. Today our focus would be on the literary terms, like the terminology, the specific terminology which we use in English literature only. As I told you before that these literary terms will be used throughout the course in order to understand history of English literature. You need to keep up with your notes. Do not lose your terms. You might be able to use them. Be responsible. So dear students, this is your responsibility to memorize these terms and to take care of these terms as well, because we'll be using these terminologies again and again, and if the idea is not clear to you, so you won't be able to get the concept. We'll use the following terminologies: character, antagonist, protagonist, diction, denotation, connotation, imagery, mood, plot, exposition, rising action, climax, falling action, resolution, conflict, flashback, foreshadowing, suspense, point of view, setting, style, theme, tone, figures of speech, metaphor, simile, oxymoron, personification, alliteration. My dear students, there are too many other things as well, but I'll just give you the briefing about the basic things. For example, if I just tell you the metaphorical representation of anything in any particular work, so you should know what do you mean by metaphor basically. And then alliteration or simile or personification, these are the figures of speech. So my dear students, we'll talk about all these terminologies in detail now, so hope you will enjoy it. Character. A character is a person or an animal that takes part in the action of a literary work. So basically character is a person, or it can be an animal as well, who takes part in the literary work. So there are, all the literary works, they are based upon different actions and different historical periods, for example different wars, and they are based upon families. So definitely there are certain characters who are playing their roles in any literary work. So the characters are very much important. If we talk about drama, if we talk about poetry, characters are present everywhere, sometimes in form of a narrator, hero, heroine, villain of any particular work. So basically this concept, like this is a very basic concept of character. Whosoever is present in the literary work, he is known as a character. So you'll find too many characters and the symbolic significance of those characters in literary works as well. So the next thing is the antagonist. So this terminology might be new to you because this is not much commonly used terminology. Fine, so I'll tell you what do we mean by antagonist. The antagonist is a character or force in conflict with the main character or protagonist. So basically this is opposite of protagonist. Here I am introducing one more terminology, that is protagonist. Fine. So basically antagonist is the person who is in conflict with the main character, who is the hero of any work. So basically this person plays his role as a villain, as a force of conflict with the main character, that is usually the hero. So when we'll talk about Shakespearean tragedies or other works, so you'll find that antagonist is present everywhere, even like if not English literature, like in other dramas, television dramas, in different films, antagonist is everywhere. He's the basically antagonist is in any film or in any drama in order to provide resistance to the hero, because there would be challenge if there is a villain in the story as well, and at the end of the story usually it happens the hero wins the game or the villain. So basically they are facing any kind of conflict. They do not try to resolve it even. The antagonist is the person who is against the hero, okay? So he is in opposition and he creates problems for the hero or other people who are playing their positive roles in the drama or in any novel. Fine. So my dear students, you have to keep in mind that in simple words, that antagonist is the villain of any literary work, and he is against the protagonist who is the hero of the work. Do you know your antagonist? This is, you know, a very personal question as well. That do you know about your enemies? Do you know about your antagonists? On your paper, take a few minutes to write down some antagonists that you can recall from movies, television shows and video games. So my dear students, here the point was not that I didn't ask you the question about your antagonist or your villain or your opponents or your enemies. Here you just have to take few minutes in order to write down the names of the antagonist. If you have watched any movie, obviously you have watched too many dramas, movies and television shows. So antagonist is present everywhere in all dramas, in all movies. So take few minutes and write down the names of those antagonists or the villains. My dear students, there is one more point, that these antagonists are present in games as well. For example, if you are playing any computer game, so there would be one antagonist over there as well. So the point is that, like, if you recall some of the antagonists from the movies, from television shows or from games, just write down their names. I just want to clarify the concept of antagonist in your minds. Remember, the antagonist is in conflict with the protagonist or the main character. For example, if you are playing a game, so basically you are the character and you are playing it, and you are playing your role over there while firing the bullets or something. So the person who is against you, who is the resistance force over there during the game, that is basically the antagonist, okay? So the main character is always the protagonist of the drama or of the film or of any show, okay? So you just have to keep in mind that antagonist is basically the person who is in conflict with the protagonist or the hero of any work. Helpful hint: you should now know why people use the saying "don't antagonize me." So my dear students, here you can see the use of the word antagonize as well. This is from the word antagonist, who is your opponent, who is your enemy. Fine. So you might have heard people saying don't antagonize me. So what is that antagonization? That is the person who is against you, who is trying to impose something on you, or who is just forcing you to do something. Basically the concept is from enemy. So do not antagonize me, do not go in the opposite direction or towards me, do not criticize me, for example, or do not impose anything or on me, or do not force me to do anything. The other concept is against antagonist. Previously we were talking about antagonist. Now the other terminology which is very much common in literature is that is of protagonist. The protagonist is the main character in a literary work. Can you name some famous protagonists that are found in literature? For example, you might have read different literary works like different novels, different dramas or poetical works as well. Can you please name some of the protagonists from the past readings? Yes, if yes, because this is really a very simple task. So if not in any kind of like written literature only, you can recall the names of the protagonists, those who are present in movies, in dramas, in different shows. Like basically, who is the hero, who is the main character of the drama or a film, around whom the whole story revolves. Okay, basically that person is in the center of the table, and the rest of the characters, they play their roles, but the story revolves around that person who is in the center of the table, not exactly the table, who is in the center of the story. So basically, protagonist is the hero of any work. The other terminology is diction. So, my dear students, you just have to remember what do you mean by diction. Diction is basically the manner in which we express words, the wording used. So dear students, basically diction is the manner in which we express word, the wording used. The way we use the wording, that is known as diction, and this is very important terminology as well. And why this is important? Because in poetry, in literature, we use these terminologies time and again. Why? Because the expression of words and the expression of saying words, that matters a lot, and it creates a deeper impact as well. For example, if we talk about poetry and we omit some of the sounds, or we add different sounds there, so definitely that is not without any purpose. We use it. Why? In order to create any particular kind of impact on the minds of the readers or the person who is just listening to the conversation. So these things are very much important. Diction is basically enunciation, saying words separately, do not mix up the words. Okay, so this is relevant to expressions of the words and how do these words create impression on the minds of the readers. So diction is enunciation, how to say words separately, as pronunciation deals with the saying the words or saying something correctly. Enunciation deals with saying words separately. Do not mix up the sounds, do not mix up different words together. Why? Because if you do this practice of enunciation, so definitely your reader would get confused, and you'll definitely write down the things as well, and it would become part of their vocabulary. If we talk about if these sounds, they would become part of their vocabulary, so this is not a negative thing, this is really a positive thing. But enunciation, because as I told you before, literature has a universal element as well. It is not restricted to one group of people, one society only. If you want to make your literature wide and universal, so you need to avoid these kind of enunciation things. Why? Because the people, those who are not living in your country, they might not be aware from the omission or from the deletion of different sounds. So what you have to do is you have to say words correctly and separately as well. Some easy examples are from our everyday life. Don't say going. So my dear students, you are not supposed to say going, because for my dear, for example, this is a very easy example, and we use it every day as well. Don't say going. Here you can see going. In this very word, you can see basically the word is G-O-I-N-G, and the exact pronunciation is going, and you can see you can feel g sound at the end of the word as well. But if you just say going, so basically this is you are omitting, you are deleting one sound at the end of the word, and it can be confusing for the the foreign speakers of English language or the foreign learners of English language. Okay, and say going, so you have to pronounce sounds separately, and you're not supposed to omit any kind of sound. Don't say wanna. say want to. So here, my dear students, like these are the contractions as well, or the shorter version of the words. For example, this is now part of American English, that they use instead of saying you want to, they say wanna, or instead of saying going to, they just simply say gonna. So while writing any kind of work, you just have to avoid these kind of you can say casual expressions. Why? Because you have to use standard language while writing any kind of thing, while producing anything. Okay, so do not say wanna, say proper word, that is want to. And this is the American version of the word as well. Wanna is American one. Okay, so here we are talking about British literature, so we are following British pronunciation and British standard of language as well. So in RP accent, or in RP dialect, in RP English, that is the only standard version of English. The rest all are the different dialects or the different varieties of that one RP accent only. So my dear students, you have to follow the traditions of RP dialect. That is not exactly the dialect, that's the standard language. So whenever you are saying words like going, G-O-I-N-G, so you have to say these sounds separately. Either they are part of one word, or you are saying different words. So here you can see that this is the wrong version of saying going only, like when you omit the sound ga at the end of the word. On the other hand, the American version as well, the wanna, that's the very casual expression. So here, my dear students, you should know how to express words and how to use words correctly. So enunciation means when you omit certain sounds. Denotation, this is another terminology which is relevant to literature, specifically to literature. Okay, the denotation of a word is its dictionary meaning, independent of other association that the word may have. So dictionary meaning is basically independent of all the other associations which are associated with it. So my dear students, what you have to keep in mind while talking about denotation or the denotational meaning of the word, the terminology which is present, the meaning of the words which are present in the dictionary or the literal meaning of any specific term, that is known as denotation. Okay, and this is an independent terminology as well. This is the independent meaning of the word. For example, if you are having a dictionary in America or in Pakistan, so definitely the words in the dictionary, the meanings which are there in the dictionary, they would be same no matter in which part of the world you are. But according to the context, the other kind of meaning, they differ from each other. So this is the independent meaning of the word. Okay, so the other terminology which is opposite of denotation, as we were talking about, that this is the dictionary meaning or the literal meaning of the word, connotation. The connotation of a word is a set of ideas associated with it in addition to its explicit meaning. So this explicit meaning is basically the dictionary meaning or the literal meaning of the words. The connotation of the words is the set of the connotation of a word is a set of ideas. So the ideas which are, so this is which is dependent upon different other ideas which are associated with that particular terminology. So this is this can be the symbolic you can say meaning of anything, or the imagery which is being used, although the wording is simple. What is the idea behind the line? So this is basically the idea or the thought behind the wording, that is known as the connotation. The connotation of a word can be personal, based on individual experiences. So the connotation, for example, if I do not have if I faced any kind of problem in the past, so that would be saved in my memory, fine. So the next time when I experience the same thing, that I'll have to take help from that memory, fine. So the information which is already stored in my mind. So same is the case with the connotation meaning or the denotational meaning. If you are a beginner, if you are a new learner of the language, definitely you start you start with the denotation meanings of the words, but with the passage of time, when you enhance your vocabulary based upon different experiences and different contexts, like when you use that language in a context, and when there is an element of feelings as well there present in using any kind of particular terminology, so definitely that becomes a connotation. Okay, more often cultural connotations, those recognizable by most people in a group, determine a writer's word choices. So cultural connotations are present in all the societies. Like this is not the literal or the dictionary meaning connotation. Here we are talking about the semantics or the meanings of the words, right? So my dear students, what you have to keep in mind that we do have the cultural connotations everywhere in all the societies, because every society has certain different you can say kind of styles of living, and they have different people over there. They have certain traditions and the values which are particularly for that society. So these connotational meanings, they are dependent upon your culture a lot, because with the passage of time you keep on adding certain things in your language, and they become part of, again I'm telling you, of your memory or of your experience. So as a society you go with these connotational meanings, those recognizable by most people in a group. So these connotations, they are sometimes individual as well. As I was talking about my experiences, my memory only, like if I had any bad experience in the past, so definitely that is part of my memory, and next time when I would be in that kind of experience again, so what happens, like I'll have to take help from my memory, the past memory. So here that is my individual experience, that is the individual connotation of the word, and these are relevant to the group activities as well. For example, as a society, for example, if we talk about Pakistani society, so the problems which we are facing here in Pakistan, definitely these problems are different from the people who are living in any other part of the world. They might be having different other problems. So fine, so whenever we have a look on the world, for example, if we say the Hurricane Sandy, which happened there in in America, they experienced Hurricane Sandy. So the emotions and the feelings which are related to Sandy of American people, we cannot experience it, fine. So that is particularly relevant to one society, the problems or the experiences which people in one society or a group of people, those who are living in that society, they are facing, they become part of their connotations. I just want to explain one more concept over here, like when we talk about writers, the kind of indirect language or the non-literal language which they use, so definitely we have to keep in mind. That is why teaching history of English literature is very much important. Why? Because you have to keep in mind the writer's personality, the context in which he or she is writing, and the other things like the culture or the problems which that writer is facing. So everything is part of literature. So you have to keep in mind, for example, if anything which is not common in your culture and you are reading something, so you have to adapt that thing. Not exactly, you're not supposed to practice that thing if you think that is not allowed in your religion or in your society, so you cannot practice it. But adaptation in that sense, like you are getting the thing that is part of that particular society and not of yours. Denotation versus connotation. Some example: cheap is low in cost. So this is denotation. This is the dictionary or the literal meaning of the word cheap. So cheap, something which is low in cost, which is low in standard. But stingy or poorly made are the connotations of cheap. So for example, when you say poorly made, or poorly made, that is the connotation of the cheap, like the experiences or the cultural things which are involved in any particular thing, you are giving the name to that person, that the thing which is poorly made, that is cheap. So this is the connotative meaning of the word cheap. Previously that was the denotative meaning or the dictionary meaning. Okay, when we say stingy, so definitely that means cheap. So what is that stingy? That is the connotative or the connotational meaning of the word cheap. So this is basically the difference. Like denotation or the denotational meanings, they are the direct meaning and they would be present as it is there in the dictionary, and these are the literal meanings. When some experiences, some context, some situations are involved in designing or in formulation of any particular kind of meaning, so it becomes the connotation. Let's use the word hot. The denotation, again I'm telling you, or dictionary definition, remembered in denotation dictionary, of hot is having a temperature higher than that of human body. Okay, so here my dear students, you can see the meaning of the word hot is here. So if you look at the word hot in dictionary, you try to find out the meaning of the word hot in dictionary, so you'll find having a temperature, the very dictionary definition of the word a very dictionary definition of the word hot would be there, having a temperature higher than that of a human body. So it is basically the temperature which is higher from the normal temperature of a human body, that is known as hot. However, when you say man, she is or he is hot, so this is one example only. Are you saying man is having a temperature higher than that of a human body? So my dear student, this is not the case. So this is, here we are not talking about temperature here. If we go for the dictionary meaning of the word hot, for example, weather is hot outside, or it's very hot. Okay, so what is that? That is basically the temperature. So hot we're taking in sense of temperature, but when we say he or she is hot, for example, so that is not the body temperature. It means that that person is very attractive, that person is beautiful, many other meanings which are relevant to one specific culture and which are based on your personal experiences as well. So here you will find out the difference, like one meaning of hot is that of having a temperature higher than that of a human body. And here you can see that the person who is attractive, beautiful, and many other meanings which are attached, many other meanings which are, and these are based like connotational meanings. These are very broader meanings as well, but dictionary or the literal meanings or the denotational meanings, these are very limited. These are very limited meanings. Imagery is words or phrases that appeal to one or more of the five senses. So basically, writers use imagery a lot in their works. Why? In order to make their works very effective. Okay, so basically what do we mean by imagery? For example, if we say that any writer has used imagery a lot, what is that imagery basically? So imagery is words or phrases that appeal to one or more of the five senses. Fine. So here, anything which appeal any of your senses, that is known as imagery. So it can appeal only one sense, it can appeal two senses, more than two senses, 3, 4, 5 senses. Okay, so we have 5 senses. Writers use imagery to describe how their subjects look, sound, feel, taste, and smell. So here you can see, my dear student, these are all our senses. Fine. So anything which appeals your sense, for example, if you are talking about any particular dish in any work, fine, for example any Italian dish in your work, so definitely you have to create that kind of smell that is not the literal meaning of the smell, like you'll feel that smell. It's not like that. It's like you are telling your reader the kind of, through imagery, that this dish or this food tastes like this, fine, through different examples. Okay, so for example, you can also talk about the sounds as well, like a noise was coming from the room, or what kind of noise, like you compare the things here in order to present anything in form of imagery. So this is very much common thing in writing poetry or drama or novel. Imagery is there definitely. You cannot make a film all the time. When you are writing something, you cannot make a film all the time or a documentary which is based on that work. You have to involve your reader by using different poetic devices, like imagery is also one of the techniques. So definitely, in order to involve your reader in the discussion, in order to make your reader part of that work. Mood. Mood is again very much important, or atmosphere is the feeling created in the reader by a literary work or passage. So the kind of mood which you are trying to create in reader's mind as well, so that is known as that is known as mood. Writers use many devices to create moods, including images, dialogue, setting, and plot. So basically, these are the different techniques which writers use in order to create different kinds of moods. Okay, they can use different kind of images. For example, the image of the war, if that is there, so definitely the reader may feel depressed and sad. Okay, the dialogue, for example, if two people they are engaged, for example, two friends are engaged in a dialogue, so what happens there, like you are basically bringing your reader into discussion as well, that they are talking to each other. So if the reader is on that place, what would be his or her feelings at that time? Setting, for example, that was really a very beautiful home where the heroine, or you can say the hero of the novel, was standing over there, and there were different, you know, fountains were there, and different pools were there, many beautiful gardens were there. So what is this? This is basically the description of the settings over there, fine. So you are describing something by using words. Okay, and plot, that is you know, the sequence of the story. Okay, like one scene first, and then scene number 2, scene number 3. So this is the sequence of the whole story. Often a writer creates a mood at the beginning of the work. Often a writer creates a mood at the beginning of a work and then sustains the mood throughout. So basically, for instance, if a writer starts his story with a lady who is in a very miserable condition, who is a beggar, so definitely you are creating a kind of mood, like you feel sad. Okay, the reader feels sad when he or she reads the novel, and you are setting his mindset as well. How? Because you are presenting something in form of images, that she is standing on the road, or she is sitting having no shoes in her feet. Okay, something like that. So what is that? This is by using imagery you create different kinds of moods, and these moods, they directly affect the reader. Okay, so sometimes, however, the mood of the work changes dramatically. So it is not specific to one situation only. Like if the writer is creating any particular kind of mood at the start of the work, so that mood would go you know, till the end of the story. It's not like that. Like moods change with the passage of time as well, and they can change dramatically as well. Like in one scene, for example, when we were talking about the rise and the fall of the hero, so that's another thing. So you can go with the same mood throughout the whole story, and you can change the mood as well. So here, my dear students, you can see that everything is in writer's control over here. So it's totally up to him or her, the kind of expressions he or she is using in order to control the mood of the reader. Plot, the other thing that is very much important, as I told you before as well, the story. These are the sequences of the stories. Plot is the sequence of different events. So different events which are involved, like different scenes which are involved in any particular kind of story. So this is the sequence of those events. The first event causes the second causes the third, and so forth. So here, my dear student, you can see that there is a logical sequence of events here, because all the events, they are related with each other. So it doesn't mean like in scene 1 like entirely new world is there, and in scene 2 you are talking about any other world. So these things, they are attached with each other, and they provide basis for example, they provide basis for the other scenes as well. The first event, here I'm using the word scene plus events, both are same. The first event causes the second, and the second causes the third, and so forth. So here you can see the cause and effect kind of thing as well. Like at the start of the novel, here you can see like first event, if you look at that event, and if you go into any other chapter, so definitely you can see the effects of the last event on that chapter as well. In most novels, dramas, and short stories and narrative, in most In most novels, dramas, short stories and narrative poems, so narrative poems are like which are told in form of story. The plot involves both character and a central conflict. So here you can see both characters and the protagonist as well as the antagonist, the hero and the villain, they go simultaneously in plot. Like here we are talking about most of the novels, because if there isn't any element or force of resistance somewhere, so definitely that won't be that much effective. So my dear students, here you have to keep in mind, like in most of these, this is only one example, okay? So like whenever we talk about any drama or film or any other short story, for example, so the hero and the villain, or in other words the protagonist and the antagonist, they go simultaneously, okay? And like if the both characters, fine, so this character is the protagonist, and a central conflict, basically who is basically the central conflict, that is the antagonist of the story. The plot usually begins with an exposition that introduces the setting. So basically what is that exposition? That introduces the setting when you you work for the mindset of the reader, okay? Fine. So this exposition is basically all about setting, like two people were sitting in a lawn, and there was somebody passes away from there or something like this. So here you are basically setting the things, the character, this is the description, a very brief description of the characters as well, and the basic situation, like the kind of context to which they have at that moment, that is also very much important, and this is known as exposition. So this is basically the introduction to the settings, the setting, the character and the basic situation. What basically is the situation, and that situation which would be changed with the passage of time in different other events. This is introduced and developed. The conflict then increases until it reaches a high point of interest or suspense, the climax. So basically these are again the techniques which you can follow, or which you have to keep in mind while reading any kind of literary works. This is basically the the exposition is introduced and developed in different events. The conflict then increases. For example, you introduce the villain, and there is the villain and the resistance force there, the person who is going to challenge, for example, the hero. So what is that basically? That is like the conflict increases and it reaches a high point, okay, and a high point of reader's interest, fine. So there would be an element of suspense over there, what would happen next. So these things are very much important, okay. And the climax as well. The climax is followed by the following action. So basically, first of all, the conflict would go up till here, and then what can you see, that there will be climax, and that is followed by the following action. So here you can see, my dear students, like in most of the English dramas or in movies, first of all there is an exposition start, and then the story would go over there, and it would increase the element of suspense in the reader, and then there is a following action, okay, or that is the end as well of the central conflict. The central conflict is basically on the top, it's in this form. Fine. Here is the central conflict where the reader is trying to know what would happen next. So what is that? That is the point of action, that is the central conflict, and then there is following action, and then there is an end of the central conflict. Basically the whole story revolves around the central conflict. For example, when we talk about Shakespearean tragedy, so there is always a rise and the fall of the hero there. Any events that occur during the following action make up the resolution. So all the events, they would become part of the memory of the reader, those which are involved in the following action. So basically, for example, we may not remember what happens in the exposition, or when they were developing any kind of conflict, the hero and the villain, they were developing any kind of conflict there, we don't remember exactly what happens. So but usually what we remember as readers, that is the following action and the things which were involved over there, and we make our resolution based on it, and that they become part of our long-term memory as well. Here you can see the plot line, which I was telling you before as well. Exposition, you can see, my dear students, here this is exposition, that is where you introduce the characters, where you introduce the settings and the main story, okay. And then there is a rising action, and here you introduce the conflict, okay. So basically this is the point where you introduce the conflict, and this is the rising action, okay. And then there is the climax, okay. So here you can see that here the conflict is on the top, okay. So basically conflict. So dear students, here you can see that this is basically the conflict which is on the top, okay. So something which is on the top here, this is the conflict, okay. So the conflict between two parties, one is that of antagonist and the other one that is of protagonist. So my dear students, here you can see the topper position where you develop, you can say, you make your story very suspensive. That is basically the climax, and that is the conflict step as well. And then there is the rising action. So my dear students, here you can see the way the writer has used, usually they use, I'm not saying that they always use, they usually use the introduce the conflict over here. This is the point of the conflict where they start, and then maybe that is based upon their fights and different conflicts which they are using. And then here you can see that this is the falling action, okay, of the hero, and then there is the resolution. This is basically the end, okay. So my dear students, here you can see that this is beginning, okay. And here you start introduce your setting, character and main story, okay. And in end you make your resolutions, okay. So my dear students, here you can see that who is involved in the conflict. This is very much important, that is antagonist and the protagonist. Okay, so this is ANTA and PROTA, fine. Antagonist and the protagonist. Basically antagonist is the person who is against the protagonist. So they develop a conflict, and then that is the rising action, and then there is the falling action, okay. And which is the prime point to remember as well, as I told you before, that usually here this is the point, like the rising action. We may not remember what happened in the rising action, okay, how did they develop the the conflict, but we do remember it, okay. That's something which is towards the end, we do remember this thing, okay. Exposition, this is the same thing as I told you before in the diagram. This is the beginning of any novel or drama, and exposition is the introduction. Basically this is the introduction. It is the part of the work that introduces the character, setting and the basic situation or the basic story. Here you can see, so basically my dear students, here you can see that the exposition is the introduction to the story, where you introduce the settings, character and the basic situation or the theme of your story. The other one is the rising action, is the part of the plot that begins to occur as soon as the conflict is introduced. So here you can see previously when we were talking about the plot line, so the rising action would take its place when the conflict is already introduced. Conflict, when the writer introduces the conflict, then that the other point is the rising action, okay. So the rising action adds complications to the conflict, increasing readers' interest. So here, my dear students, you can see that we are towards creating the suspense, fine. So basically the rising action, it adds complication to the conflict and increases reader interest as well, because we are towards creating suspense for the reader. So this is the rising action which creates suspense and which gives rise to the conflict as well. The climax is the point of greatest emotional intensity, interest, or suspense in the plot of the narrative. The climax typically comes at the turning point in a story or drama. So here, your story would go into entirely a new direction. Fine, where you start with the exposition. Fine, the brief introduction to the setting, to the characters, and to the main concept of the story. Then you introduce the the conflict there, and then there is a rising action, the steps which are involved in creating the suspense, and then there is a climax which is on the topper position. That is basically the conflict. When your conflict is on the top and the emotional intensity is there, interest is there, so basically that is the point of suspense, when the reader is just dying to know what would happen next in the story. So that point is known as climax. The climax typically comes at the turning point in a story. As you know, this is very much obvious as well. Like, there are two parts of the story. Like when we talk about Greek tragedy, so there are always 2 points. One is the rising action and the other one is the falling action. So when you turn your when you turn your story into entirely opposite direction, that point is known as climax. Falling action is the action that typically follows the climax and reveals its result. So basically this falling action leads you towards the result or the end of the story, and it is followed by it usually follows the climax. Previously, when you saw something in the climax, the conflict which is on the top and the higher level of emotional attachment is there, and you develop your reader interest as well, and reader tries to know what would happen next. So then the rising action comes and it leads you towards the end. As I told you, that the falling action is more important for the reader, because the falling action, like the consequences which the hero or the villain has to face with the passage of time, that would become part of the memory. Resolution is the part of the plot that concludes the falling action by revealing or suggesting the outcome of the conflict. So what would be the outcome of the conflict? You develop the conflict over there, that conflict between two human beings, more than two human beings, or between man and himself as well. So I'll introduce this concept as well. So basically this resolution suggests the outcome of the conflict. Okay, so it leads you, this is basically the end of the story. Conflict is the struggle. The other concept from the diagram, just recall my students from that diagram what was there in the conflict. Fine. So basically the conflict is the struggle. Fine. The conflict is the struggle between opposing forces in a story or play. So my dear students, here you can notice that the conflict occurs between the antagonist and the protagonist, or in other words you can say between the hero and the villain of the story. So basically this is the struggle, this conflict is the struggle. This is the struggle. Fine. So you just have to keep it mind that this conflict in a drama or in a play. Fine. So what is this conflict? This is basically the struggle between two parties. Fine. So this is hero and this is villain. Fine. Hero and villain. So basically this struggle is here. Fine. This is the conflict point. So my dear students, here you can see that this is the conflict point. What is this? This is struggle. Okay, so there are two types of conflict that exist in literature. External conflict, number one is external conflict, exists when a character struggles against some outside force such as another character, nature, society, or fate. So what is that? This is external conflict. Fine. This is external struggle, man versus man, like other man in the society, man versus nature. So what kind of struggle is this, or conflict is this? This is what basically is this? This is man versus man, and man versus nature, or man versus society, or man versus fate. So dear students, here you can see that the external conflict occurs between two parties. One is that of the hero or the character of the story. all are basically the characters of the story. External conflict exists when a character against outside force. So maybe the hero is trying to do something against the other characters, or like that can be the outside force, like other characters in the novel, or against nature, against society, or against fate. This is known as the external conflict. Fine, between the writer and any other external force, that is known as the external conflict. Other thing is the internal conflict that exists within the mind of a character who is torn between different courses of action. So basically this is a bit complicated conflict as well, when the man is fighting against himself. So there is a climax as well. So here basically the man is torn into two pieces, or into two personalities. Fine. So this is a struggle between man and his thoughts. Fine. So this is internal conflict that takes place like in one individual only. No other external forces involved, no element of nature, no society, no other characters are involved. This is only one character basically, and the internal conflict that can take place in his or her mind. Okay, so flashback, you might have heard this term before as well, flashback. Okay, so these terminologies, they would help you a lot because you are also studying poetry and other literature courses as well. So whenever you'll see this thing, like whenever you'll read any drama, any poetic form of literature, or any novel, so definitely flashback would be there. Flashback, for example, you might have seen in the movies as well, when any person in the story recalls the past. So what is it? That's a flashback. A flashback is a literary device in which an earlier episode, conversation, or event is inserted into the sequence of events. So basically that event has already happened in any other event. Fine. So flashback, when you recall that thing and when you add that episode or that conversation or that event into the sequence of the new event, so that is known as flashback. Often flashbacks are presented as a memory of the narrator or of another character. For example, if I am part of any novel, so what do I mean by flashback over there? For example, if I just want to recall some of the things from the past, so that is the flashback, because that is the part of my memory that happened to me previously as well. So this is known as this is known as flashback. The movie Titanic is told almost entirely in a flashback. Okay, so basically that was the full-fledged movie was in the flashback. The lady was there and she was telling the story to other people. Okay, she is now very old, and that story is relevant to that story is relevant to her youth age. What are some other films that contain flashbacks to help tell stories? There is a Story Holes, Willy Wonka. You can also think of some more movies as well. Fine. So my dear students, what you have to keep in mind over here is that, like when you recall some of the things from the past, so when you add something in literature from the previous episode, from the previous event, so that is known as flashback. So these are part of the narrator's memory, the one who is telling you the story. Foreshadowing, this is another terminology. Foreshadowing is the author's use of clues to hint at what might happen later in the story. So these are basically in form of clues which are present in novels, in dramas, so like what can happen later in the story. Writers uses foreshadowing to build their readers' expectations and to create suspense. So here, my dear students, you can see that foreshadowing is used for the purpose of creating expectations and suspense, like building expectations and to create suspense. So what is this? That is foreshadowing, like when the writer gives you some kinds of clues, like this would happen, and you build up your expectations, like yes, this can happen next in the story, okay? And there is an element of suspense as well, because you do not exactly know that either that is true or not, what you are expecting that would happen or not. This is used to help readers prepare for what is to come. So basically, this is the preparation phase. This foreshadowing is the preparation phase as well, where the writer prepares the reader to help him or her what can come next, okay? Can you think of an element of foreshadowing? This is a task for you as well. Do watch any drama and try to find out the hints which are there in that drama. You can watch any kind of drama, so the hints which would be there in the drama, these are the elements of foreshadowing, okay? So think about it. What do you mean by suspense? So suspense is very much common in all the stories. Like if you talk about films like Pakistani film, let's say, or Indian films, so suspense is there, because if there isn't any element of suspense, nobody is going to watch that movie. Everything would be clear cut over there. Suspense is the growing interest, so it grows with the passage of time. So this is the growing interest. This is not static interest, only like you are interested in watching the film. This is the growing interest which develops with the passage of time when you watch the movie. And excitement as well. And excitement readers experience while awaiting a climax or resolution in a work of literature, right? So when you wait for the top conflict of any story, so that is known as suspense, and then you go for waiting for the following action, and then you wait for the resolution. So what is this? This is suspense. It is a feeling of anxious uncertainty about the outcome of the event. So basically you are not sure here what will happen. So there is an this is interest plus excitement elements are present in suspense. Writers create suspense by raising questions in the minds of the reader. So whenever I have a question, so I would be suspensive about it, fine? So what writers do, they use certain kinds of techniques and strategies in order to develop readers' suspense in any particular kind of work. So what they do usually, they ask them different kinds of questions in order to develop their interest and in order to build their growing interest as well, because they'll have to make their stories interesting, otherwise nobody is going to read them if the stories are not interesting or they are not based on any suspense, fine? Point of view, this is another thing which is very much important in literature. Point of view is that is perspective or vantage point from which a story is told. So basically there is always a point of view or vantage point that is working behind the story, okay? It is the relationship of the narrator to the story. So here we are involving narrator over here who is telling you the story, and his relationship to the story as well. This is basically his point of view, okay? His or her point of view. First person is told by a character who uses the first person pronoun, for example I. So this is an indirect creation of the this is a direct creation of the story as well, which is being told in the first person pronoun I. Third person limited point of view is the point of view where the narrator uses third person pronouns such as he and she to refer to the character. So basically he or she, this is an indirect narration of the story as well. Basically who is the working force behind that character? It's the writer himself, but this is an indirect narration of the story by pointing out he or she. Usually they refer to the character, and that is basically their own point of view. This is their own point of view. Sometimes that is in form of I, and sometimes that is in form of he or she, and they refer to somebody else, but basically that is their own point of view, okay? Setting. So my dear students, so far I guess you are learning the things, and in future, like studying literature would not be that much difficult for you, because we are dealing with the basic terminologies which are relevant to English literature. The setting of a literary work is the time and the place of an action. So basically, setting, whenever we talk about setting, so what do we mean by these settings? Is the time and place. Okay, so setting means time and place of the action. The setting includes all the details of the place and time, the year, the time of day, even the weather. So basically, again, I'm telling you that it's not possible to make a documentary or film on all the stories. So it is the writer's personality who creates impressions like who creates images like this. Okay, and then to tell at the start of the event that what was the time of the day, and then the year as well, and then the the weather, what kind of weather is there, in order to set mood in order to set readers' mood. Okay, the place may be specific country, state, region, community, neighborhood, building, institution, or home. So place can be anything. It can be home, it can be any institution, it can be neighborhood, it can be any community, it can be any country. So you are not limited over here. So in settings, what you usually talk about, that is the time and the place. Okay, in it's, for example, March, and year is 2012 or 2010. Fine. So in place, what you talk about, either the scene is going to be set in home setting, or you are talking about any office or any institution. Details such as dialect, clothing, customs, and modes of transportation are often used to establish settings. So here again, the kind of clothes those characters are wearing, and the dialect which they speak. Dialect, what do you mean by dialect? This is the variety of language. So my dear students, here what you have to keep in mind, that the details of the dialect and what kind of language they are speaking, either they are Arabic speaking people or they are Spanish, that's the language. What about dialect? This is the division of the language, the variety of the language. For example, if we talk about English literature, so while talking about the settings, the writer can say that they are talking in Scottish dialect of English, fine, or they are talking in, for example, Pakistani dialect of English. So these are all the varieties. Okay, so in this, by hearing about their dialects, we'll get to know about certain things as well, the kind of clothes which they are using, and the customs which they follow, and modes of transportation. For example, if they are going somewhere, through which mode of transportation they are going, they are driving themselves, or they are going by bus or by bike. Okay, in most stories, the setting serves as a backdrop, a context in which the character interact. The setting of a story often helps to create a particular mood or feeling. The same thing as I told you before, in a setting, what you tell that you just provide the context where the characters, they interact with each other, and you develop the mood and the feeling of the reader as well. Fine. So basically, you are trying to create a particular feeling or the mood of a reader. That's the purpose of telling about the time and place. Okay, time, place, and dialect, clothing, everything. So basically, you are building up the context or the situation. Fine. Style, another terminology is style, is a distinctive way in which an author uses language. So basically, this style is individual as well. It is the writer's individual way of using language. Word choice, phrasing, sentence length, tone, dialogue, purpose, and attitude towards the audience and subject can also contribute to an author's writing style. So this style is individual. Fine. So how this is individual? Because every writer uses his or own pattern or style of delivering anything. So that can be like the word choice, the kind of words which any particular writer uses, or phrases, or sentence length, like if the sentences are. So basically this style is all about using the language, and what kind of language, like for example the kind of sentences you use, the kind of vocabulary items you use, and tone and the purpose as well, and the attitude towards the audience. So everything comes in style. So here you can see word choice, phrasing, sentence length, tone, dialogue, purpose, and attitude. So my dear students, this is author's effective style. Okay, so everything comes here: word choice, phrasing, sentence length, tone, dialogue, purpose, and attitude towards the audience and subject. So these all things, they contribute to an author's writing style. Theme of a literary work is its central message. So basically this is the central idea of any work, concern, or purpose. A theme can usually be expressed as a generalization or general statement about people or life. So basically this is not exactly like what is the theme of any particular kind of story. So theme, you do not tell something in specific ways, because that is general about different people and maybe about their lives. The theme may be stated directly by the writer, although it is more often presented indirectly. There is no hard and fast rule all the time, like the writer tells the theme indirectly. He or she can share it with the audience directly as well, but usually this is presented indirectly. When the theme is stated indirectly, the reader must figure out the theme by looking carefully at what the work reveals about the people or about life. So when the theme is presented indirectly, so what you have to do, so you can say the bullet is in reader's hands then. Okay, so he or she will have to focus on the rest of the things as well, like either the theme is about people or about their life, by looking carefully on the context. Fine, so by looking carefully on the context, he or she can know about the theme. The other thing is tone. It's a reflection of the writer's or speaker's attitude towards the subject of a poem, story, or other literary work. So basically this is the writer's attitude towards a particular subject, story, or character. Tone may be communicated through words and details that express particular emotions and that evoke an emotional response from the reader. So basically this is a tone we use in order to communicate with the reader in form of words. Okay, so like the emotional response you want to get from the reader, and basically this is all about speaker's attitude. Fine, tone is the speaker's attitude. Okay, for example, word choice or phrasing may seem to convey respect, anger, light-heartedness, or sarcasm. Fine. Okay, so here it all depends upon the tone, like he was giving any kind of sarcastic remarks, or he was showing anger, or his speech was full of respect. So everything, again I'm telling you, we are here revolving around the writer. Okay, what writers they use and the different terminologies which are very much important in literature. So basically this tone is the writer's attitude towards something, or this can be the speaker's attitude as well. Fine. Figures of speech. A figure of speech is a very important concept. A figure of speech is a specific device or kind of figurative language, such as hyperbole, metaphor, personification, simile, or understatement. So these are the figures of these are the figures of speech. There are too many other figures of speech as well, but today we'll just talk about few which are very much common, okay, and the idea must be clear to you. Figurative language is used for descriptive effect, often to imply ideas indirectly. So basically this is the indirect use of the language as well. For example, when you draw a comparison of two entities, so here what is this? This is basically the indirect, you are using the indirect language. It is not meant to be taken literally. So figure of speech or using figurative language, that is not literal language, that is not dictionary language. So it is based on employed ideas, fine. So basically everything is in reader's hand, the kind of he or she has to use his or her background knowledge in order to understand something, because this is opposite to of literal meaning. So here you can see that figures of speech, they have the connotation meaning, okay. Figurative language is used to state ideas in vivid and imaginative way. So here, my dear students, you can see that how can you create imagination? This is an important aspect of this is an important aspect of using language in literature. So imaginative, you compare certain things, you tell certain indirect things, you create certain kinds of expressions while using figurative language in order to leave things on the reader's shoulders the way he or she can understand the things, fine. So this is to state ideas in vivid and imaginative way, in a clear and this is to use ideas in an imaginative and vivid way. Why? Because this is the way to create imagination in reader's mind, okay. Metaphor is one kind of speech in which is very much common in all kinds of work. A metaphor is a type of speech that compares or equates two or more things that have something in common. A metaphor does not use like or as. So here this is a direct comparison. So metaphor basically is the direct comparison. Life is a bowl of cherries, okay. So here you can see the word like is missing, fine. So my dear students, here you can see if we say life is like a bowl of cherries, so that would be indirect comparison. So here you are giving all the attributes of bowl of cherries to life. Obviously that is not possible. Life is not a bowl of cherries, like if we go for the literal or the dictionary meanings of the words, but this is a figure of speech. This is the beauty of the speech as well, fine. So life is a bowl of cherries. So here you are giving all the attributes of bowl of cherries to life, not only one. So when you use as or like, so you take out some of the attributes of one thing and you allot those attributes to any other thing. But the case is different in metaphor. First of all, this is the direct comparison, plus you give all the attributes of one thing to another. For example, here is one more statement. He is a lion, okay. So he is a lion and he is like a lion. He is a lion and he is like a lion. What is the difference? Basically, he is brave like a lion. He has all the qualities of a lion. That means he is a lion. If we say he is like a lion, so we are taking some of the attributes of lion and we are giving it to that person. Maybe he is brave like a lion. Maybe he is, he has the leadership qualities like a lion. Not all the attributes, but when we say he is a lion, so definitely this is a metaphor and this is a direct comparison of two things. Simile. A simile is another figure of speech that compares seemingly unlike things. Similes do use the words like or as. So basically, previously when we were talking about metaphor, that is the direct comparison. So simile is a kind of indirect comparison, and here in similes we use like or as, fine. So my dear students, her voice was like nails on a chalkboard. So her voice was like nail check. So here you can see that this is not as much direct as the metaphor was. So here we are comparing her voice plus nails on a chalkboard, fine. So here you can see like we are we are comparing two different entities, fine, by using the word like or as, and this is known as the indirect comparison as well, fine. So no, not possible. Her voice was like nails on a chalkboard. This is simile, another kind of figure of speech. Oxymoron is a figure of speech that is a combination of seemingly contradictory words. So contradictory words are the opposite words as well. For example, same difference. Same is opposite of difference. Pretty is an opposite of ugly. Roaring plus silence. So my dear students, this is a very interesting figure of speech as well. When you you combine two contradictory words together in order to create any certain kind of expression. For example, same, difference. Okay. For example, same and difference. Okay. Pretty plus ugly. Okay. So what is basically the point here? Like pretty plus ugly. What do you think, my dear students? Like pretty is opposite of ugly. Okay. And roaring plus silence, fine, both are opposite. Roaring is full of noise and silence is opposite of roaring. So what is basically this? This is, don't worry, this is oxymoron. When you combine two contradictory ideas or the words together, that is known as oxymoron, and usually we use these kind of expressions in poetry. Okay, so in order to make something prominent. Personification, another idea, another figure of speech, that is in which an animal, object, force of nature or idea is given human qualities or characteristics. I'll clarify the concept with the use of an example over here. Tears began to fall from the dark clouds. So what is basically this? Tears began to fall from the dark clouds. So what is the combination? Where is the combination of tears with the dark clouds? Fine. Obviously tears are something which come out from the eyes, not from the dark clouds. Fine. So basically the idea is that of rain. Okay. So look at the definition of the word personification, in which an animal, object, force of nature or idea is given human qualities. So the dark clouds, they have the quality of crying or of weeping. So what is this? Basically this is personification. Fine. Alliteration is the repetition of sounds, most often consonant sounds, at the beginning of the words. Alliteration gives emphasis to words. So here basically this is basically the repetition of the consonant sounds at the end of the words in a verse. Fine. So here, my dear students, you can see an example. This is Peter Piper picked a pack of pickled peppers. So here you can see the repetition of the consonant sound pa here. Fine. Peter Piper picked a pack of pickled pepper. So what basically is this? Like when you emphasize on some words, so you use these kind of expressions. Fine. Like this is known as alliteration. So my dear students, here what you have to keep in mind when we talk about alliteration, that is a repetition of consonant sounds at the start of words in a verse. Fine. So my dear students, what you have to keep in mind is that the repetition of alliteration is known as the repetition of consonant sounds at the start of words in a verse. So example is in front of you, like this is Peter Pepper picked pack of pickled pepper. So the repetition of pa sound is here in order to emphasize on something. Fine. So my dear students, here we are going to end today's lecture. What we have learned today, it would really be helpful for you in future as well when you analyze poems, dramas and novels. So the ideas of using figures of speech and other literary terms would be clear to you, and you'll go for the indirect meaning as well, and how do certain sounds are represented in any word, so what is basically their impact and what is the purpose behind using those terminologies. Fine. So my dear students, what you have to keep in mind, the basic concept you have to, and with the passage of time when you apply these literary terminology, and with the passage of time when you analyze any piece of work by keeping in view these literary terminologies, so what you'll really find a difference over there, because literature is not simple, it's a very complex phenomena. So while analyzing any kind of thing, these literary terminologies would be very helpful for you. Okay, the reference sources which I consulted for today's class are a dictionary of literary terms by Martin Gray, and some of the terminologies are also taken from Google. So I hope you had good time with me. Hope to see you again with another lecture that would be about one of the periods in the history of English literature. So I hope, my dear students, you are enjoying the things. One thing that is very much important regarding today's lecture is you have to apply these terminologies, start reading novels and different poems, and start noticing these terminologies over there. Okay, in this way you can learn the things in a very good way. Okay, have a nice day. Allah Hafiz.